It was cool to see you on SNL.
Oh,
you were so good.
Thank you.
So good.
It was
So that's
surreal.
Taylor's bucket list.
It's just to see Ramy that was
on
mine.
SNL.
Really
And
nice
I can die now.
Yeah.
Was that a bucket list for you? SNL?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was crazy.
It'd be crazy if you were like, nah.
Oh, hello. Welcome to Off Script with the Hollywood Reporter. I'm your host, Yvonne Orji, here at the beautiful Georgian Hotel in sunny Santa Monica, California. Now, normally, 5 comedians is usually a pretty long show. 6, and you're pushing it. Today, we're definitely pushing it. But the good news is there are no tickets, no drink minimums, and definitely no hecklers. Well, unless you count the comics heckling themselves. But today, we are gonna hear from Mike Birbiglia of The Old Man and the Pool, Alex Edelman of Just For Us, Jacqueline Novak of Get On Your Knees, Jenny Slate of Seasoned Professional, Taylor Tomlinson of Have It All and After Midnight, and Ramy Youssef of More Feelings. So sit back and relax as our panel goes on the record, but just a little off script with the Hollywood Reporter. They're all yours, Lacey.
Thanks, Yvonne. Hi, and welcome to the Stand Up Roundtable. I'm Lacey Rose, and thank you all for being here. I'm going to start with a question for everyone. You're standing on stage, you look out at the audience, describe the audience member that you dread the most.
A man. Sorry, I had to. I couldn't resist. Okay, I've changed. Something's changed in me since joining a round table.
It could be someone that's drunk. It could be someone you know. I mean, it could be any number of things.
The figure in the joke?
The figure,
person in the joke?
I've had that experience before.
Yeah.
You're telling the joke, the person the joke is about is in the crowd, and you're just like, oh, God.
And you go for it anyway.
I mean, you have to.
I think anybody you know is a really good answer.
Yeah.
Like, I've had people from high school come and sit in the front row, and you're like, no, please, not there.
Why do they do that? They love that.
They love
They
that.
think they're supporting you.
They do. And they are, and we appreciate it.
Yeah.
But it's,
Do we, though?
I mean, I do. I'm just
Yeah.
like, just sit like halfway back, right when the darkness starts, that
yeah.
midway point
Yeah.
in the audience. And any like folded pair of arms in the front row, I think,
Yeah,
no
they
matter who
love
they're
that.
attached to, you're kind of like,
know what
let's
I-
unfold those over the course of the night.
People you know is not who you want in a stand-up comedy audience. Jacqueline and I toured together for like a few years, and we always compared it to if you were an exotic dancer or a stripper, where it's like, you don't really want your friends to be there when you're stripping.
Exactly.
Your
non-comedy friends.
Yeah, your non-stripping friends or
Maybe they'll
whatever.
tip
Right, your
more.
non-stripping friends.
Yeah.
Maybe they tip more, though.
I think it's a seduction.
Friends.
It's a
It's like,
seduction.
good job.
It's embarrassed to be seen in a seduction.
Absolutely.
Like we used to talk about a business voice or whatever, right?
Oh my God, yes.
Or like, how did I?
Someone
okay, I got
catches
it
you
wrong.
on the phone
Yeah.
with your doctor's office being like,
Yeah.
I'm around on Tuesday,
Yeah.
but if Wednesday works, that could work too. It's like your business voice. And if someone catches you doing your business
friend,
voice, you're like,
horrible.
oh, I'm so shamed.
Yeah,
Although
it's a little bit of that.
But Jacqueline, I feel like I've read you used to actually look at who was coming to the show each night,
Yeah.
and that
Like
would
a pervert.
I wasn't going to say that,
Yeah.
but that does feel like
Not
a sort
every
of a risky.
night. I
not
will
every
say
night.
the
Okay.
journalist pushed that towards hyperbole.
Got
okay?
it.
She's,
Got it.
she's
Got
going
it.
through the name. Okay. You know what I did do the night before, like opening my show at Cherry Lane? Very, very nervous. I started looking at the names, the ticket sales, just like literally. I'm a login girl. You know, I like to get into the back end and see it all live. And
that's
I'm in there.
Terrifying.
and I just went through and I just names I didn't know.
Let this be a warning to all future comedy audience members for watching you.
But I couldn't make a
Never
quick.
look at the list.
Well, that's what I was going to ask. Who else has looked, and have
I'm
you been
way too
rattled?
scared.
Whether it's an ex, whether it's an idol. Do you
not-
look at the list? Do you actually want to know? And has it ever sort of rattled you in real time?
For logistical reasons, sometimes, like my cousin, because sometimes my cousins are coming. I have a lot of cousins, apparently. And my mom would be like, Nancy was there and you didn't say hi. And I'm like, well, I didn't know she was coming. And she was like, she told you on the family WhatsApp. And I was like, well, I forgot.
family WhatsApp.
So my MC will sometimes go through and pick anyone with the last name Edelman or any of the other associated names. And she'll be like, does this person belong to you? Does this person belong to you? Does this person belong? But it is weird when an idol comes to see your show. It's like, how did anyone ever like kill Lincoln? Because the entire audience is watching the famous person. I was like, wasn't at that show everyone's like, is Lincoln enjoying this? Is Lincoln think our American cousin is good? Is he, oh no, shit. Like, that's how I felt like anytime like a famous comedian came, people would be like, what does so-and-so think of that joke? Does so-and-so think that punchline is funny? Is like a very, very
But are you
exposing.
doing that too? I mean, from stage, are you also
I try not to look at them. I scan the audience like.
Do you blur your eyes at the audience?
I look right into the light.
Do you want bright?
Now you gotta engage.
I can't.
Yeah, I played at each section of the,
Really?
it's tic-tac-toe, like kind of like you gotta
But
play.
you section them. You don't have a leader?
I cater to the pockets that aren't laughing and try to sort
Really?
of like.
Desperately try to tickle them from below.
Or sometimes they go, they're not laughing because I'm looking at them, so I'll look at the other side. Like, you're working
Out of the corner of your eye. Wait.
Do you tickle them from below? Like I don't want us to move off that phrase because I saw you trying to get away from it, Jack, and now I'm like, I want
I
a
was
little
proud.
bit
Right
more.
back.
I was hiding my pride.
I love it. How do you actually define a bad show? Like, there's got to be some memorable disasters in this bunch because everyone has them.
It's always kind of nice when you don't get what you want from a show, because then the next show is better. That's kind of the only way I ever wrote material, was just having really bad shows.
But how do you define that? What does that actually feel like in real time?
For me, it just feels like not connecting with the people who were there. So sometimes if I walk off and I'm like, oh, I was just saying what I had in my head before I got up there, then it wasn't really effective, So if I'm just saying things I could have said to myself in my hotel room, it's a pretty bad show.
Yep.
Like I didn't connect with who was there, and there's something wrong with that.
I remember
for me.
seeing Ramy for the first time because one of the writers for Ramy's show is a mutual friend of ours, Josh Rabinowitz. He's a brilliant writer,
comedian, too.
and he's a great comedian, and he was like, I think that you'd love my friend Ramy. So I went to see you at the Comedy Cellar one night when I was there. And it's interesting hearing you talk about like having a good show versus not having a good show. I don't think you can have a bad show because I think your essence is fundamentally funny and interesting to watch.
That's very kind. I definitely will walk off and feel like, that glazed eye thing? So there's sometimes times where I'm just like, I feel like I didn't give people what they needed because I wasn't able to get present enough. That really might be the thing that kills me, because I'm like, not even that they paid, it's like they put on their shoes, like they came out, they gave us our time, like their time, like we had this time together, and we have like mutual friends in comedy who've passed away, right? And then you really start thinking about time and you go, oh my God, like those 7 minutes are everything. Because I remember people's sets when they really give themselves. So anytime I have a show where I'm like, I was checked out or whatever, I've gotten to a point now where I just don't go to the comedy club if I think that's the show I'm gonna have. If I'm not ready to like fully be myself, then I'm like, I'll just stay home.
But there are different briefs for different shows, right? Like different briefs. There are different goals that you have to.
Sorry. I thought, because was
Boxers,
anyone else
briefs,
Like
confused?
underpants is what I was thinking.
I mean,
and
I had a comedy
is
song
that what you
underpants.
meant?
and
You said what?
I almost thought like a brief, like
like the pelican
like a.
This roundtable is out of control.
I love it.
We've lost the thread. He was saying
confused.
some kind of sentence.
Who creates the brief and
But I
who
wanted
gives
to
it?
Who
know.
creates the brief?
Yeah, and
the
who
venue
receives
and the
the
ticket
brief?
price and the audience member.
Choose a different word, Alex!
Fine.
No.
Remit. That's worse.
Do you mean like?
Goal. There's a different goal.
We can all
There's a
agree on
different
goal.
goal for the show. So like at the Comedy Cellar, sometimes a bad show is a show where you fucking crush. Sometimes like you go up there and you destroy and you come off and people are like, great set. And you're like, no, I want to try new stuff, but I tried a sort of half new joke and it didn't work and I lost a little faith. So I was like, well, here's 15 minutes of, here's 15 minutes of stuff that I know is going to do well. And so like if I plan on going down to the Comedy Cellar, which is where you have to do well but also like really work stuff out, and I go on stage and I lose my nerve and I do really well with the audience but I don't come away with anything, that's a failure. That's a big mistake because it's still a service industry, but you also have to progress as an artist, and sometimes those two things are like
At
necessarily insane. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I was just sitting here listening to Alex going, I'm so glad I didn't tackle this bad show question, because Ramy and Alex had these very artistic answers, and I was like, acoustics, a high ceiling, a nightmare. Like, ooh,
I mean, you're not wrong.
Not wrong.
When you crush, it can be a bad show. I was like, oh no.
That is such a humble brag. You're just like,
amazing.
wait, I always crush. Is it possible I'm having
When
bad
you're at the
jokes?
Comedy Cellar, not passed.
Never audition. You didn't audition. You can't be passed without
By the way,
auditioning.
not being
Can we
fast
tell the
is
actual story of
amazing.
this?
I think that I can be overly concerned with having to do what's important to me within an environment that feels set. And sometimes, and I'm not saying this is like necessarily true, it can sound like a cop-out, but like, it just from my perspective, if something feels, I hate that I'm gonna say this because I know everyone, like people have said before, but like old school male, there's a part of me that's like, I reserve the right to say this is not important to me. And like, I just want a stage where for me, I can get past the things that separate me from other people, which is also, by the way, the thing that's why I go to therapy, like to try to achieve intimacy, which also means like not hating parts of myself. Like if you think like part of yourself is like essentially bad, you'll probably hide it, which means that then you can't like be truly intimate. And like everyone does whatever we're doing for different reasons. But for me, I'm like, I'm sensitive. I already feel bad enough. It's not because I'm like undeveloped. It's just the kind of like mammal I am. But also for real, I can't do less than like a 48-minute set. I'm a long distance runner on this one. And like, I don't want to like be in plays, but I want to like stand on stage and talk for a long time. And that's just like, what's up?
Yeah.
I guess.
Cool.
Is that,
It's so cool.
yeah.
I'm like 46 to lure him in. 47th minute.
Like everything's connected to something else is how I feel. And I know that's not true. And like the people that like I do comedy with like for years, like Gabe Liedman and Max Sylvester will be like, no, Jenny, you can do 15 minutes. Like you just don't. And it's like, yeah, but it feels like if I do this one, then it's like, I'm not going to be able to go to sleep for 3 days unless I do that one. But if I don't do that one, if I do that one, then I have to do the other one. Yeah. So maybe I have OCD.
There are places that audiences will go with you, and there are places where you can sort of feel perhaps they won't. I feel like, Taylor, I've heard you talk about sort of earlier in your career, there was sort of darker material, whether it had to do with your mom or something else, where you could feel audiences didn't want to go with you. I'm curious, sort of what does that feel like, and when does that shift for you?
Yeah, with that specific material, I mean, I just started really young. I started in high school, so watching a 19-year-old do stand-up at all is very uncomfortable, and people are already scared for you and nervous about the show. So I don't think I had the maturity as a performer to pull those jokes off.
But what does it look like when like it's not working? How do you know that? How are you?
Oh,
how
people
do you
aren't
receive
laughing. And it's like devastating. Oh, it's so bad.
And you're pouring
it's
your
what I
heart
would
out.
call a bad show. For other people, it's when people are laughing too much, and you're like, none of this is new. No, I really like. Yeah, it just when people are sad and uncomfortable and looking at you like, are you almost done? Like, yeah, I think that's what's so great about stand-up is you know pretty quickly if something does or doesn't work. Like Alex was saying, you just go up wherever you can and you try out the same material in front of as many different audiences as you can, whether they're there for you or not. I think that's important to go up in front of people who aren't there to see you specifically, like you were saying, so that you know it is going to work, if not everywhere, most places, so that when it does get on a big platform like Netflix or HBO, that people who aren't familiar with you will hopefully be converted into fans.
Sure. Are there subjects that you feel like your audiences were at any point sort of uncomfortable going with you?
Mike said something to me, Birbiglia, said something like, you know, there's your agenda and the audience's agenda or the booker's agenda or whatever, and something along the lines of like, work your agenda, right? So for me, that meant working on my show or like, okay, I'm gonna put it up in New York or whatever, but like I'm doing it at the Jukebox in Peoria, and like, I know it's not gonna, I mean, some people might find it kind of interesting or whatever, but there is no sort of pleasing them. I am planting my feet and saying the words, and I'm kind of like maybe burning my chance in the room, you know what I mean? And like, or like I did it at the Punchline in Philly, and like Chris, my boyfriend, was like, you know, the way you went up in Philly and just like bombed, and I was like, I bombed, you know, like I was almost like, what do you mean? I mean, I stood up there doing my art, like it was almost the delusion, the required delusion, but this phrase, like my agenda, really helped me almost, you know, not listen to the crowd, kind of, and go, like, I gotta do what I think I gotta do and trust that what I'm saying, that will find its audience. And so I had to block the crowd reaction. I mean, almost just like, it's weird, but it was huge for me. That, like, my agenda doesn't matter. Tonight, everyone in this room might hate me. This club will never hire me again. I had a lot of bad nights, like, and those nights where I had to stand there and say my words and get them in my head. Thanks, Birbiglia.
But you're getting at something, right? Like the thing is trying to get somewhere. Like you can't just rehearse in a space. I've heard stories about some comics who just
run their set in an
run their
empty
set
room?
in a carriage house filled with mirrors.
What?
So they know.
Who does that?
Chris Rock.
Chris Rock, yeah.
But like it's but you know
I
this.
thought that was a metaphor. I was like, that's beautiful.
No, but he actually built mirrors.
Built in mirrors and did that for, I think, but before Bring the Pain. Yeah.
No one else has a mirrored room in their house.
No, stand there with a hairbrush and do the thing. But like, you have to get on stage, and there is a goal, and the goal is growth, and it's also a service thing. So like, what do you do? How do you show up for both? For sometimes I'll go on stage, material that I know works, and then graft it onto it very carefully. New material. And then material I know works, and then graft it onto it very carefully, new material. Oh, and that's working, I'll follow that pass. Oh, that didn't work. Here's new material, grafted onto like a thing.
So pro. Like that to me is like a discipline that I don't always have. I kind of like, I'm like, let's drive it into the ground. Like, sort of like these big swings of, I don't know.
Well, sometimes you get desperate. Sometimes if a big new show where you need a lot of new materials approaching, you go, well, tonight can't be service night. Tonight is kamikaze night.
Right.
And you just go out there with all this stuff. And then some nights you're like, I've got a couple months till that show that needs to be ready, and so here's a little more risk-averse X, Y, and Z so that you kill. But it's like a different thing.
What felt at the time like the riskiest bit?
I did a show called The New One. It was on Netflix, and it was about having a child and about the darkest feelings, because I never wanted to have a child. And it's all the reasons why I never wanted to have a child, and about how I had a child, and how all the ways that I was right and then I was wrong, and it's kind of an emotional turn. And there's a moment in it where I say, at my darkest moments, I thought, like, I get why dads leave. And there's comedians laugh at that. Humans don't. It's more of a dramatic turn.
It's an emotional moment.
It's an emotional moment in the show. But there were times early in the process of that joke where I really felt that the audience felt almost betrayed by the show. That I led them down a comedic path, and then all of a sudden I'm saying essentially my deepest, darkest, dark night of the soul confession. And I even had a prominent reviewer said, he lost me when I get why dads leave. Oh. Very prominent reviewer.
See, but I smiled when he said that.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, that's cool, Mike. I'm like proud of you for that.
Yeah.
I'm really proud of you, like, for losing them, because you know how to get them. You know what I mean? I'm like, yeah, like.
Thanks.
Keep it coming, baby.
Because you have to see, right? Like, you have to see sometimes you just don't care about the thing as much, and then you say it and you're like, why did I even say that? I don't even care that much about it. Like, I had the thing, I think, like, after I had my baby, I was like trying to talk about the changes in my body, but I didn't want it to sound like cliche, like after the baby body material, but also there was like some stuff that really weirded me out about my own body. And like, it was really hard to do the material because it was uncomfortable. And sometimes I would do it and it would like hit like the right spot. And sometimes it would just seem like I didn't like myself. And I was like asking people to be like, yeah, you're ugly and your body sucks as well. Like, it was like this like terrible focus on, and I was like, and I couldn't figure it out. And eventually I gave up, and like, I really regret it now because there's like one joke that I liked, but I was so afraid to like lose. I didn't want that feeling of like feeling like such a, the word that comes up for me is like abomination. Yeah. Like, she made us eat shit with her. You know, like we thought we were invited to a party with cake and she shat and she made us eat her fucking shit. Like, it's like, oh my God, like I just wanted to talk about how like my nipples used to be for sex and now they're not. And like, I don't know, it got ruined. And like, it's just like everything collapses. And like, I can't even go in that area anymore. And like, but it's really hard when you're like, I'm interested in it, but it might just show actually where I'm like sick.
Well, it's
Not
funny.
that I am, but maybe.
It's
right
funny.
to camera, like straight down the barrel.
I think that's why like comedians like spending time with other comedians, because like you and Chris, your boyfriend, were on the road with me when I was developing that, and it took comedian friends saying like, no, go towards that. Because audiences often won't tell you go towards that. Audiences will be like, easy on that, but it's people who are comedians who are usually most likely to be like, no, say the thing that's like really deep in your subconscious.
But then on the other end of figuring out the joke, the audience is so happy that you figured it out.
Right.
But there's that like middle of the like growing out your hair, where you're like, like just that middle where it's just a little weird, and then it's like, oh yeah, I like that. There's that bit that I think is comedians will tell you, no, like keep going, like you should do that. That's why, it's so fun.
Is there a clear third rail for each of you?
I don't do jokes about people in my family or like friends of mine or people I'm dating without running it past them, because I just don't think it's worth like destroying your relationships for
You always
90
done
seconds.
For a good laugh?
Probably not. No, not when I was like 21. I'm like, burn it all down to be a legend. But yeah, then you get older and you're like, oh, I'll be alone. So yeah.
A lonely legend.
Yeah, exactly.
I always have to be kind of dragging myself into it if I'm talking about somebody else. Like it's never really about anyone other than myself, and I think that's kind of the solo act of it. So even pulling in like, you mentioned a celebrity, you mentioned this, you mentioned that. I don't like doing jokes at people. Like I'll mention them, but it's really kind of like, because I'm also kind of jumping off the same cliff with you. Like we're gonna do it together, and also everyone here is just as, is guilty of the same exact thing. And the whole thing is like, how do you offer something about yourself that actually would make someone feel less afraid or less alone? But then it gets like really messy on the way to do that. But I can't like point at someone else and say like, that's a mess. It's like, no, like I know that mess because it's literally the same one that I have or I have a version of. And so, yeah, third rail would be like, if I'm not, it wouldn't even be fun.
There.
It wouldn't even be fun.
Yep.
Yeah. But topic, there's not a single topic you can't talk about.
Does anyone that you have spoken about, that you have joked about, do you hear from people after, positively or negatively?
I try to obscure.
Yeah.
I try to turn real people into archetypes for for obvious reasons.
Yep.
And I also don't talk about people that I date. It bothers me that I talk so much about my family sometimes, only because I speak very lovingly about my family, always. And so people still sometimes come to my parents and they're like, oh, he really got you. And I'm like, what? By saying my dad is like really nice and smart and thoughtful and my mom is very cool and collect. Like I speak really well of my family. But in terms of like third rail topics, like it's tricky because all the power is in the third rail.
Totally.
There are all these things you can't talk about anymore. And like, it's actually kind of more exciting. There are more tensions, more interesting tensions to comedy's about the buildup and release of tension. You have free tension. Deal with the new ones and like try to release them or find tension in a topic that no one thought there was tension. So like third rails are like a big part of it, but like what Ramy's talking about is elegance. You want a degree of elegance. You want a degree of personalization.
Sure.
It's another thing I picked up from Birbiglia when we started sort of chatting in earnest is sometimes Mike would be like, the joke's good, but it's not personal enough to you yet. Even if it's about something random. And so like it's a really, I don't know, I think about this topic a lot.
October 7th happened, and I think you called your producer, one of your producers, and said, I don't know if we should, maybe we cancel these shows. I think I heard you say Who Can Dance in the Slaughterhouse. You obviously didn't cancel the shows. I'm curious if it actually felt that way once you got back on stage.
It was a complicated moment. It remains a complicated moment.
Certainly does.
I think Ramy was one of the first people to call me, and we had a really amazingly really fulsome, helpful for me conversation, and was really appreciated that. It was hard, and it's made me more mindful of the fact that it's still hard. After a while, you get inured to human suffering because that's the way the thing works. But like it's been constantly reminded not to, which has made it difficult. Yeah, getting on stage. Again, another conversation I had with Mike after like what do you do? Do you change the show? And I thought that the best thing to do is make the show conversant with the moment that we're living in, but still an escape from it. I think the best comedy is conversant with the tensions that we live with, but it makes me sad. So at some point, going on stage and talking about not that feels like a real problem. Uh-huh. So I'm glad we didn't cancel the shows. Right before I went on stage in San Francisco for that first show after October 7th, I was standing in the back of the room and I just saw like 1,000 people on their phones watching a war. And I was like, okay, maybe this is like a better thing to do than not at least getting people away from like a war for an hour. Uh-huh. So like an hour and a half, but I wrestled with it all the way through, whether or not this is right, whether or not I put some new lines in to like talk about this feeling, but didn't change the whole show. But like, yeah, something I wrestled with all the way through. So
And Ramy, I feel like would go up. You were on stage. You were on tour.
Yeah.
In those weeks after, and you would talk at the top of the show about this very thing of is this the right thing to be doing right now? I'm curious sort of what you learned about yourself and your audience in those experiences.
Well, I think my audience has always been kind of open for these conversations, and it's kind of why, like, I don't think I've never felt stand-up is actually that risky, because I've kind of always been in conversation with an audience that has like a really global perspective as to tragedy, I think, and suffering. And so there is a way to kind of go at it that, leads with connecting hearts, because I think that the news is very much like talking heads, and people just like, it's literally mental, and what we get to do gets to be emotional. And so it's really liberating, because we don't need to kind of, I don't know, anytime anything gets too factual or anything gets too even historical overtly, it feels very like, just like this stopped being comedy.
Right.
And so I kind of try to, center the emotional piece and yeah, so for me, like, it's interesting because my special is much different than what I thought it was going to be. Even the special that I just put out, I probably left like 30, maybe even 40 minutes of other material on the table, because I kind of felt like, oh, there's actually something, back to what we were talking about before, if I'm actually present with the moment and with the audience, there's something totally different that they should be hearing, that they want to hear. Alex, I went and saw his show, and he has a diverse audience, but also like a really Jewish audience, which was really cool. Yeah, and like, it's like really cool. And that was also really fun too for me, because I do think like there'd be a bunch of like Orthodox Jews who were like, yo, dude, I've seen your show, who like they're like, because we pray a lot on my show. Orthodox Jews like praying, and so they're like, wait,
3 times a day, they're obsessed.
They're like, we do a version of that. But then, same thing with my audiences. Obviously, there's a lot of people who come out who are Muslim, and so I've always kind of felt that there is a space to have where you're talking to people who need to hear a specific thing they can't hear somewhere else, and also challenging them to hear something that they probably might not want to hear, and getting to play with that. And I think that is kind of what's fun about it. It's like the very little thing that we could do. I constantly contend with how important that piece is, and I also think like a lot of the language around that can feel like a little hard for me to stomach when there's like people who really put themselves on the line to kind of try and help the world, because I'm always going for the joke. So it's like my space, the space I want to have in the conversation is like really, really small.
Wait,
like really small. Like I want to be like the doorman, like letting people into a room where there are actual interesting things happening. Like I am the valet. Like there is nothing, this is not like about this like philosophy thing. Like this is truly just like a little bit of like with the grease that makes the door not sound so squeaky, so that like the people can kind of walk into a room and actually process real things. And so I'm really aware of, kind of that.
Stand-up comedy is one of the rare art forms where it's one person speaking to a group of people. There's no studio, there's no network, there's no filter. So you do have a sense when you're watching somebody speak that that's roughly what they're thinking about. And it's so raw, and it's the reason why I love watching comics. I just love comedy because it doesn't feel like it's processed.
There's a lot of conversations around sort of truth in this moment, but I'm curious, like, do you worry about sort of your comedy being fact-checked in this moment, which is a ridiculous thing to say, and yet I think that's sort of where we are.
After the Hassan article came out in the New Yorker, I got a lot of text messages that said, I hope you jump through that second-story window. Referencing a show I did many years ago where I jumped through a second-story window.
I heard it was a first-story window.
Yeah, that was definitely like something people wanted to talk to me about. I don't know about you guys, but they wanted to talk to me about that a lot. And I take it, I love Hassan, and I think the intent of that writer remains very nebulous in why they would write that. It's very confusing to me.
Yeah, it's not a thing to fact-check. Like, this isn't.
This is the thing.
I don't want to break anyone's. I don't want to break anyone's heart.
Nobody ever fact checked swimming in Cambodia. It's not something people do. I think you have a sense of what level of truth the person is telling, and you take a guess, and sometimes you're right, and sometimes you're wrong.
It's also really like interesting in terms of like what you need to say as like what's true to you that like you really want people to know. And I thought a lot about this when that article came out, because I was like, everything in my special is true, but a lot of it also is about my perception. Like it's like, well, I didn't like hear what the people who decided to, send me an audition to be Pennywise actually thought when they sent that to me. But like, I'm trying to tell you, I know it's such a bummer that I didn't go in on that. But like, it's like, I'm trying to show how I felt rather than saying like, I mean, I guess I did end up screaming like, that really hurt my feelings, because that is also something that I wanted to say. But I wanted to show like how confounded I was, but also humiliated. And so like, I acted it out. And like, yeah, I'm not like accusing people of actually doing that or whatever, but I just started thinking for me, like, it would be weird if that was how my act was, or my performance or whatever was assessed or something, because it's so much about like the psyche, about like how you are in the world and like how it feels and
the artistry.
Yeah, and it's like I'm trying to show not just like, I'm not just trying to make an impression, but I'm trying to show what it feels like to have an impression made on me. I don't know.
It's all about the how though, and like I have to say this because we're on this comedy thing, because it's like I told you this, but the first ever one-person show I saw was Jenny's at UCB.
Wait,
and
which
I remember
one?
the one where you were playing the heiress, and it was like it literally made me go, I want to do that. Like I think I was 17 or 18 or something. Like I remember just like maybe it was like my first year of college, and I remember seeing it, and I just loved how you did it, and it was just all about that raw energy. And I think that's all that this is. So to fact check it is so weird, because it's like I think it speaks to a larger. We have like an integrity problem. Like we have a spiritual void. We have an like as a society, because the common person, a politician talks, and they're like, yeah, he's probably lying. But this comedian, so I don't care. I don't care where Mike jumped from. I don't care if Alex actually went to a meeting. Like it doesn't matter, because it's all about like what the approach is and the how and the why you're approaching it that way. And I think that it speaks to a massive integrity void that we look at entertainers the way that we do, that we look at stand-up the way that we do, and because it really is, at the end of the day, there's nothing funnier than a fart joke, and it remains to be, and that should tell you something about this whole art form.
I agree. There's nothing funnier than a fart joke. It's my favorite joke.
Proven.
Someone in that big coffin falling on their head.
You mentioned the Pennywise thing, and I'm curious sort of this idea of like, what does Hollywood know what to do with all of you? And some of you have written your own stuff. You're laughing at this thing. What
to do with all of you? I think a hardcore no over here.
But would we want it any other way?
I don't think Hollywood knows what to do right now. We're at an inflection point, and I think everyone here has been really clear as to what they want to do, how they put it together, and I don't think that anyone here needs to be confined to any sort of box. I don't think there are types. There are barely even channels. Like everything is open for grabs. So that like, what does Hollywood know what to? That's a whole other, and no one's at fault. Like that's actually just a reflection of the entire landscape of media and how things are made is just radically shifting.
Mike, you at like 30 got a CBS sitcom pilot, right? Which was the thing you thought you wanted.
This is like
this is great.
This is like Jerry Maguire, like.
But it wasn't the thing you wanted. You ultimately.
Yeah, no, so.
The look in your face suggests that there's more here. Go.
Yeah, it's like in my 20s, I just thought that I wanted to be a star somehow. Yeah, just like I want to be a comedy star, you know. Yep. I don't even think in hindsight I knew what that meant. And then when I was 30, I was given my own sitcom at CBS, and they shot the pilot, and Bob Odenkirk played my brother, and Nick Kroll played my cousin, and all this stuff. And it was like, oh my God, I can't believe it. And then by the time it went through the factory that is studios and networks and all that kind of thing, it just wasn't really my life. It wasn't my creative vision, and it didn't get picked up to air, and thank God. I went back to New York. I mounted Sleepwalk with me. Nathan Lane put his name behind it, and his reputation, and it was Nathan Lane presents Mike Birbiglia Sleepwalk with me, and it changed my life and career, and I haven't looked back. I just make my own things now.
Although then you did that for us too as well.
That's like my favorite kind of thing, is when comedians can have their own authentic voice.
What's the brass ring? I mean, I feel like my generation grew up, and I'm in your generation, thinking SNL was the thing.
Did you want to do it later? Because I saw you worked like when I think of you, you worked so like always. You were always doing it. That's why I was
Yeah.
telling you it's so cool that you got this show.
That's nice. Thanks, Ramy. No, I never wanted a late night show. Like, I only ever wanted to tour theaters. Like, that's all I ever wanted to do is just tour theaters off of my stand-up like Brian Regan. And the reason I took After Midnight is because they're like, we film Monday through Wednesday. So you could tour on the weekends. And then everyone who's involved is just incredible. And I wanted to work with all of them. And, you know, once you're on tour by yourself, you don't see other comedians that much. So I was like, oh, you can just like play around with other comedians on TV for half the week. That sounds great. But yeah, no, it was never like a goal of mine to do a traditional talk show or anything like that.
You know, it was our special on HBO, like Chris Rock.
Uh-huh.
I mean, that was it. That was
Gotta
like
buy
the
a
center
carriage
of a
house and
vision
fill it with
board.
nerds.
Like, that was to me, that was like the height of the form.
Yep.
And I know there's now more specials than there used to be. And, you know, that's a whole thing, right? But it was like marching around on a big stage with confidence, I guess.
So you've achieved the...
Yeah, that was really it. And, you know, I do feel some bit of like, not that it's a constant question of, okay, if I died tomorrow kind of thing, but I'd feel a lot better dying tomorrow than I would have felt dying tomorrow 5 years ago.
I think the brass ring for me is like, this sounds really po-faced, but like I always wanted to like be seen. Not as like a star, but like genuinely I always wanted to like, I guess like there's a romance in being seen. I was like looking for romance. Like you said, like 45 minutes, like long form so works for me because like I require a good amount of explanation. Like, I require, be like, what are you? And I'm like, here, let me just talk for an hour. And then maybe I'll get, maybe there's something of that.
I guess it's the being seen thing, but like, I do kind of feel like we're here, you know, as individuals, right? And it's like, what do I have specifically that's mine to offer up during my lifetime? Like, what's the me thing? And I felt like I did that in one part, you know, at least I felt I did that one part of me once so far. And before, I don't think I had. So, you know, I was almost like to the gods, you know, like kind of like, again, don't want to die tomorrow, but just like, okay, like we got one on the fucking books, you know what I mean? Like,
I feel like Jacqueline's an example of like someone who, in a different era, you might have been watered down to your comedy might have been watered down to a different type of comedy. So like when people see Get on Your Knees, they really see your brain like out on the table. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's like, that's so beautiful. And it's, I think partly because of the moment that we're in, where people have, because comedy's so ubiquitous, people have become connoisseurs. So people found Jacqueline's comedy, and it's become like when you ran the show Cherry Lane in New York, it was a phenomenon. You know, when Alex ran his show in New York, it was a phenomenon. It's like, if you didn't see it, you're not in the know kind of thing. And that wasn't of the era when I was a door person in the 1990s, when I was in college at the Washington, D.C. Improv. There wasn't that. People weren't comedy connoisseurs in that way, where they were seeking out like, oh, what's different from the people who are here for the next 6 weeks.
It's so funny though, because I was reading an interview that Ramy did a couple of weeks ago, maybe months ago, and someone asked him a question that I get asked a lot also, which is sort of about the cultural specificity that they suppose your thing has, right? They're like, I assume they're asking in a euphemistic way about you being a Muslim.
Yeah.
And in the same way they're asking me euphemistically about me being a Jew. And you said that people come up to you and go, oh, I understand because that's my family, my family's Jamaican.
Yeah.
Or they come up to me because that's my identity and my desire to do X, Y, Z, but I'm, you know, from anywhere else. And the first thing I thought when I read that was, that's Norman Lear. That's Norman Lear always said, I'm just another version of you. And the specific being universal, like, I do think that like, people are looking for specificity now in this like very scattered media landscape, in like the individual in a way that they used to maybe get from television shows.
Yeah.
And so like there's something very old school about the aesthetic, even as the content vessel for it is really different.
All right, we're gonna end on a lightning round. Number one thing on your bucket list.
This isn't an answer, but it was cool to see you on SNL.
Oh,
You were so good.
Thank you.
so good.
It's really amazing.
It was
So that's
surreal.
Taylor's bucket list.
That's
It's just to see Ramy that was
on
mine.
SNL.
Really,
And
nice
I can
one.
die now. I can die tomorrow now.
to see Jenny at the Comedy Cellar telling those guys.
Oh my gosh.
Was that a bucket list for you? SNL?
Yeah, that was crazy.
It'd be crazy if you were like, nah.
No, I mean and I've been so fortunate, and I think everyone here we've all checked a lot of bucket list stuff, even by getting to talk to you. Like it's you kind of have to check bucket list stuff to get here.
Sure.
But that SNL's still SNL. It's crazy.
That for me,
it's crazy.
When she asked that was one of the first things I thought. I don't think that's my answer, but hosting SNL, I think all of us are fans to some extent.
Yeah.
Everyone pretends a little bit to different degrees, but we're all like fans of comedy. We're all like, I rarely meet comedians where I truly believe they're not fans. So like, it's a thing that I almost was like, what's being on SNL like? You know,
I think that probably was my like bucket list. It's weird to like get the bucket list and then be like, oh, I guess I'm not sure like that it was what I wanted, or you know, it wasn't the thing. But like if I hadn't been on it, I would be trying to be on it still. Mm-hmm. And when I watch it, I still feel like magical about it.
I also have this like feeling that it will become more relevant actually, because I was watching something and there was just this like AI video of LeBron doing a presser, and like I believed it for the first like minute, but then he was talking about, it was like LeBron's take on the Civil War or something, and he was like, I was there, and then I was like, oh wait, this is a joke. But I do think being live in front of like 300 people, it's happening now. Yep. The stock on that is only gonna rise. So I actually think it's kind of gonna be a lifetime brand. Like, cause I do think that there's something that people really crave, which I think also makes stand-up this art form that I think will continue to like only have more and more people come to it, because we all wanna know it's happening. Like we wanna know it's real, and we wanna know, and I mean, not the stories, but the experience, you know, is like actually, like this person actually said that. It is gonna be really, I think, really important to feel.
My bucket list thing would be like, if I really could master new things, old things, like I'm acting a little more now. To master that seems like a whole new bucket list challenge, and like little goals along the way feel less like I'd love to win awards or like do SNL or play Madison Square Garden, but really it's for like the multiplicity of experience.
Sure.
And I think the actual thing would be like, God, if I really got to a place, Seinfeld always talks about the joy of mastery and how like so many rich people are unhappy because they don't have mastery in their life. God, to master something new where you express yourself in a way you never thought you could, it's really cool.
What's something you guys used to joke about that you look back on now and cringe?
People's weight. It's not really a taboo yet, and no one's ever called me on it. And I was never like, that guy's fat, but I would make jokes like obliquely. There are plenty of things that I wouldn't say now, not for the reason of like cancellation, but because my standards are higher than they used to be. I've made some jokes that I would just like, I'm embarrassed by a lot of my early stuff. It was like, I was not good.
There's a little bit of like, I don't know, like learning on the kind of like, not like the wrong clay or something like that, but there is a little bit of like,
That's a really great way to
figuring
describe
out
it.
how to put things together, and then the building blocks are kind of arbitrary or something. You're like, you know, like in the craft.
I don't worry about cancel culture,
Yeah.
but I worry about the iterative nature of comics figuring it out being somewhat arrested. I would say that that's a more, not to be like that's a thing I worry about more. People figuring it out. I had a lot of things I need to like figure out.
When I look back on things I did early in my career, it's not that I'm embarrassed of the word choice or something that's out of date in time. It's like that I wasn't opening up to the audience and being honest about how I actually felt. I was attempting to project a persona that I thought people would like. And it's embarrassing. And I think that what's helpful to look back on that for is to go, okay, but now I can. Now I can walk out on stage and say exactly how I feel. Like the best compliment I ever get is like recently I've been touring this new show and people are like, that's what you're like. And I'm like, fuck yeah.
Yeah.
Like that's like, I don't know, it's not done yet. It'll be another year in the oven, but like that's what I'm going towards.
Yeah.
I'm not even Jewish, so it's really, you gotta get away from that.
All right, we're going to end on something that's going to feel silly, but I feel like it is actually revealing. What's the most used emoji on your phone?
Probably the hands clapping.
There you go.
Hands clapping.
There you go.
Yeah.
Eyes being wide open.
Yeah.
Oh, the side eye?
It's just wide open eyes.
Yeah, the big ones.
Like that, where he's like,
Yeah.
I do use the heart a lot, and but it's a tie. I hate it. It's just so like what a diaper, you know, like it's like a fucking baby.
I use
but
heart a lot.
I use the heart a
I'll
lot.
show
I like it.
heart
I just
solidarity.
want people to know, you know, like I'm just like, but don't give thumbs up because I feel like that's too sporty. But I do the lightning bolt a lot, and I love it. I absolutely love it. And I feel like when people get it, they're like, oh, you know, like they like love that.
Yeah.
Like
Up a
really,
little?
like you got it. Yeah, like see you there. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I like the one heart and then the little heart
Oh, I like that.
together. It's a little bit of like an ellipses heart or something. It's like got a little movement to it. And of course the ghost, just the classic.
Ghost is
He's a little
Classic.
silly too.
Imbued with, you know, the spiritual. Yeah, I like him. And yes, I gendered the ghost.
You can take it back.
Yeah, exactly.
I
ahead.
refuse.
Go ahead. Go
I
ahead.
refuse.
Apologize into the lens.
I really like the face melting. There's a lot of ambiguity there. You're not sure what they're
Why?
doing.
Yep.
You're just like, why is there? If someone says something, I don't know how to react. I'm just like, So yeah, that.
Take it home, Ramy.
I think I used the baby angel. There's like 2 angels, but this one that's the little
Baby.
angel. Because I feel like I'm always, I don't know, I'm always in situations where I'm like, let me show the little baby angel so we can all remember that we're
I don't
here.
even know what baby angel is.
It's like,
Of
it's
course,
the two
he's got
angels.
the face and he's got the little wings.
There's
and
the
the
Does
halo.
he
yellow-
have like a little like
Wait, is it the one with
like
the
a
wings or the one with the
saucer?
halo?
No, it's got wings. So the halo is the older angel.
Yeah, not
But I use the baby to kind of say, hey, I know
show
I'm being
you.
annoying, but remember, we're all just babies navigating this world. So it's just a nod to the inner child.
I love it so much.
I couldn't even finish it. But I
but you
think
did.
I do use it. I think that's why I use it. I've never put it in these words. But then I looked at Mike and I was like,
There's real elegance to some of these emojis. The one that
See?
looks like Mount Fiji, you're just like, wow, that's really
Oh, you
beautiful.
throw
doing
one that's
work.
just like a rock. Like when you can find one, you're like, this has not been used.
they're doing work.
Feel incredible.
Yeah,
it's very
cool.
nice.
Like,
I
no
love
one's
it.
using
On
this.
that note,
Thanks for
thank
having
you
us.
guys
Thank you so much.
for
We
doing
really
this.
appreciate it.
Mike speaks for all of us.
I don't know.
Taffy?
Today's takeaway, with all the uncertainty in the world, one thing is for certain. We need comedy now more than ever, and we're not going anywhere. Until next time, I'm Yvonne Orji, and this is Off Script with The Hollywood Reporter.